we're going to look for a moment at crop circles, and I'm going to show you some patterns in the crops that actually predict this type of change happening in the world, that there's a DNA change going on. First of all, I want to make it clear that crop circles have existed for a long, long time. If you go back to 815 AD in France, back then there was no church and state separation. The church was the government. And that's got to suck. Now, in this posh quarters that he's got here with all the luxurious interior decorating and lighting, he's busy scribbling away at an edict to try to further control and manipulate the masses. And the edict is called "Against the Foolish Opinion of the Masses About Hail and Thunder." This is basically the 815 AD version of swamp gas, because they believed in cloud ships. Ships in the sky like boats, but they're in the clouds. From what they called Magonia, that were flattening crops into circles as a ransom to protect against bad weather. So what they felt was that these cloud ships were giving them good weather, that these cloud ships were making sure the weather was good. But hey, if you want me to give you good weather, you need to give me something. Let me flatten these crops down into beautiful little circles for you. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but they were pagans and they were running around naked in the forest, so we got to kind of give them some credit where credit is due. So he had to issue a prohibition against locals taking seeds out of the crop circles because they wanted to use them in fertility rituals. Why do you think they did? Because these crop circles were totally energized. And when you built something out of them and you ran through it, man, you got a big, big charge of energy. It's amazing. So that's why he spent so much time having to defend the farmers, because the farmers were getting so angry about everybody taking out the crops from their crop circles that they actually had to complain to the government and make a government edict that says you can't do it. In the 12th century, you see reports of fairy rings, which they call the ring of daisies caused by elves dancing. I found this 1880 illustration actually showing the fairies running around in a circle, stamping down the grass. Very fascinating, because this is the crop circle. That's how they believed it was being made. And in 1678, you have this legend of the mowing devil, in which a farmer hired a mower to mow down his crops. And the mower says, "I want $2,000 to mow down this crop, even though it's only going to take me, a day." And the farmer's like, $2,000? You know your mind. I mean, I'm just making it into conventional terms, just to try to make it more accessible to us. "I'd rather have the devil mow my crops down than you." And he goes to bed that night, and the whole field lights up like it's on fire. Oh boy, something's going on out there. Am I going to lose all my crops? Is it burning? Then he goes outside the next day after all this fire, or what he thought was fire, this brilliant white light, and a perfect circle had appeared in the crop, so neatly mowed that no mortal man could have done it. So this obviously scared the crap out of him. And so, of course, being in the 1600s, it's the devil. It's got to be the devil. Got to be. And so they actually illustrated the devil going around with his little sickle and chopping the crops down. In the same period of the 1600s, Dr. Robert Plot was also looking into crop circles, among many other forms of research. He was one of the first paleontologists who was digging up dinosaur fossils and trying to make sense out of what this was. And so when he dug up a particular fossil, he thought that he was seeing the scrotum of a giant. So he is our first homoerotic paleontologist. And yes, that would be an enormous boner. This is actually the hip bone of a megalosaurus, so you can imagine how well hung this giant was. Oh my God. And what he was doing is he was drawing the crop circles that were showing up in the English countryside. And they're not just circles. Look at this. And this is his really, really silly hypothesis where he says, oh, well, there is a square gust of wind which drew this perfect square in the ground. Of course. That's how it works. What you're seeing is that the modern theory has really not gotten a whole lot better than this. We haven't really grown much in 400 years in mainstream science, because some of the English say that the crop circles are nothing more than an army of hedgehogs running round and round. Literally. I mean, that's one of the arguments of what was causing this to happen. He also found that the soil became much more dry and loose than ordinary, and that it had a white horror on it. I'm not even going there, so don't even... Much like moldy bread with a musty, rancid smell, but to the taste insipid, meaning it didn't taste bad. Now, that's a heck of a scientist, man. Ugh. You can imagine. That's brave. He's a real trooper. Here's what's fascinating. Dr. Gil Levengood documented exactly the same thing in the 1990s. Because you have a technology that is zapping the water out of the soil, which makes the soil get super dehydrated, which is why it gets so dry and crumbly, right? All the moisture's gone. Because the technology is pulling the water out of the soil to make sure that the crops don't do what? Catch on fire. That's why some of the other research that's been done has shown that there are natural underground water aquifers where the crop circles are being formed. And when a crop circle comes down, all the water under the ground goes away. Why? Because the water is being pulled out with an advanced technology to stop the crop from burning up. That's what's going on. Now, in the late 1940s, William Cyril Williams actually saw a whirlwind touch the ground and form a circle. In only a couple seconds, the wheat fell down and produced a sharp-edged circle 3 to 4 meters in diameter. That's in the late 1940s. So here we have a guy who's seeing what he thinks of as a whirlwind, meaning that he's seeing objects spinning around. And this perfect circle shows up in the ground. That's the 1940s. 1972, in Warminster, suddenly I heard a noise. It seemed that something pushed down the wheat. Check out the next sentence and really pay attention to that. What does it say? That night the air was completely still. No wind. This is not a wind phenomenon. And here's an eyewitness. We send people to prison for life. We have executed people on eyewitness testimony. And here you have an eyewitness standing in a field and watching a crop circle being formed right in front of his eyes, unfolding like a lady's fan, forced down in a clockwise direction with a high-pitched hum. And there was no wind. He just literally watched the crops just go whoosh, and boom, there's a crop circle, just right in front of him. You can imagine how amazing that must have been to see. Just amazing. So in the early days of the 1970s, you had single circles. The next stage was that you got 4 points around the circles. That became very common for a while. Then you started to see a lot of this kind of stuff. And for a while, people didn't know what that was. But then we looked back into ancient iconography, and we found that it was a symbol of the pregnant mother goddess. What do you think they're telling us by giving it to us in the earth, in crops from the earth? Could it be that the earth itself is pregnant, that the mother earth is giving birth to a new age, that's what this 2012 thing is about again? The same people that built the pyramids and gave us the year 2012 in the pyramid and gave it to us in the Mayan calendar. If you believe that the Mayan calendar was built not by the Mayans, but by the people who were helping the Mayans? Could it be that they would now be coming back for the last 1,200 years since 815 AD, making crop circles, and then telling us, look at 2012. But did they tell us, look at 2012? And the answer is yes. We're going to get to that in a second. Now check this out. In case you didn't think that it was the goddess, they came back a couple years ago and said, nope, it's the goddess. There she is. Here you see 3 pregnant goddesses. 1, 2, 3. And actually, that could be one over there, too. This came through in 1990. It was on the cover of the Led Zeppelin box set, which I got for Christmas in 1990. I had no idea that that was real. I thought it was just something they'd made out of a carpet or something. I had no idea it was actually crops. 1991, you've seen me talk a great deal about this in my other articles, the Barbary Castle Formation, which appears to be saying first dimension, second dimension, third dimension, fourth dimension, that this is a dimensional shift. Because first you have just the point in the void, then you have the rotation in 2 dimensions where it starts to fan out, and then it becomes 3-dimensional. If you connect these lines together, you have what looks like a pyramid. And then you go into the tetrahedron inside the sphere, and that's the 4th dimension right there. Next you have the Mandelbrot set. A group of scientists were sitting around studying crop circles and said, wouldn't it be amazing if we saw a Mandelbrot set show up in the crops? And the next day, that's what happened. They're listening. 1996, around Stonehenge, right in front of Stonehenge, Truck driver is going by, and he drives past this area of the countryside that's flipped up like this, and he doesn't see anything. And 15 minutes later, the farmer found this formation in his crops. Now, each of the distance between these tram lines is about 90 feet, so this is an enormous, enormous size object that was formed in 15 minutes in the crops, on the ground. Surveyors were called in, and it was asked of them how long would it take to build this with any type of normal process, and they said 3 days minimum, 15 minutes. And then again, you go back to 815 AD, and what did the pagans in France say was causing crop circles to form? Cloud ships from Magonia. Do you think maybe they saw the cloud ships? No, why would they actually name them cloud ships if they hadn't seen them? Of course they saw cloud ships. So that's what I'm trying to tell you here. It's like, look, these guys have been coming here for 1,200 years in ships, and they're building crop circles for us. So what's the message? What's the point? Well, check this one out. I mean, look at how big that sucker is. The 90 feet between each of these lines. That's enormous. And it's just beautiful. That's my favorite one of all because there's so much geometry inside, like the cat's cradle, as you can see here. It's amazing. Now, this was an obvious illustration of the Koch snowflake, which is one of the fractals. And then scientists started saying, the skeptics started saying, oh, no, that's not a Koch snowflake. It can't be. So circle maker said, okay, fine, you don't believe us. You don't believe it's a Koch snowflake. We'll build you another one. We'll put a snowflake in it for you. Yeah, that'll show you. Now we know what we're talking about here. So now that is obviously an army of hedgehogs running round and round caused that to form. This last formation is my favorite one of all because to suggest that anybody could have hoaxed that mandala with anything they could do on the ground, it's crazy to think that that could have been done by people with any type of land equipment. I mean, these are crops. We're talking about stalks of wheat. And how in the world do you get it that precise? There isn't one mistake. If you look at it and you really study the flow pattern, there's no mistakes in that sucker. It is perfect. How the heck could that have been done?